Hello and welcome. Our top focus remains on Kenya. The East African country is on edge as anti-tax hike protests escalate. The situation has now turned extremely violent. At least 10 protesters have been killed and scores have been injured after clashes broke out between police and the demonstrators in the capital, Nairobi. Meanwhile, a section of Kenyan parliament was set on fire as protesters breached the barricade to storm the compound. The police resorted to gunfire to stop them from entering. The latest escalation comes as the Kenyan Parliament adopted the controversial Finance Bill 2024 that introduces new tax hikes. Protesters have been demanding to scrap the bill. The protesters had called for a nationwide shutdown for today. While the Parliament debated over the bill, young protesters rallied across the country despite heavy police deployment.
Don't respect the law. There is no criminality in assembling in the streets. I was there in the morning. I have seen the unprofessional police force. We don't have a police service. They should scrap off that nonsense and call them a police force. They are here brutalizing innocent citizens who are unarmed, who are only speaking because the president has successfully captured parliament. He has successfully captured the judiciary. The only surviving sovereign power is the people. Now he's trying to brutalize us.
The protest took place in all major cities of Kenya. Massive discontent was seen in Ruto's stronghold, Eldoret, where large rallies were held against the president. In opposition bastion Kisumu, or the port city of Mombasa, chants of Ruto must go echoed in the streets.
What you are seeing here, the residents of Mombasa County have decided that Ruto must go. As from now, henceforth, tumeamua ya kwamba kama mbaya ni mbaya na tumereject financial bill. Hatuna fujo, hatuibi mali ya mtu, sisi tunatembea tu polepole na wale wametuletea maji.
The protests, being led by Kenya's Gen Z, are against the Ruto government's new finance bill that introduces several new tax hikes. Amidst the widespread discontent, the government rolled back some of the contentious proposals last week. However, protesters kept pressing the demands to scrap the bill completely. Now, earlier, Ruto invited the protesters for a dialogue, but they urged him to address their demands publicly. The anger, for now, is unabated as demonstrations spread across the country. Authorities are being accused of using excessive force, while the protests have taken a deadly turn. Amnesty International Kenya says it is investigating the whereabouts of at least 12 people who, as per reports, were abducted in the middle of the night ahead of today's planned protests. The list of those arrested includes bloggers, content creators, human rights defenders, doctors, and a parliamentary staff. The Ruto government plans to raise $2.7 billion through tax hikes. It argues that the move is necessary to fill state coffers and reduce debt. Kenya's public debt stands at 68% of GDP. Now, this is higher than the 55% of GDP recommended by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. How critics worry that Ruto's way of solving the debt crisis will only add to the people's expenses amidst high inflation. Now, for more on this, we have with us Nicodemus Minde, political analyst and researcher at Institute for Security Studies, who is joining us live from Nairobi. Welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I
Now,
hope you can hear
despite
me.
the
Correct. All
heavy
right.
opposition with thousands on the streets and at least 10 people killed, the Kenyan parliament passed the contentious bill. There is certainly a bigger crisis at hand now. How does President William Ruto aim to contain this crisis?
Well, I think it is the president needs to really speak right now. He has been away from the city since morning when the protesters began, and his government and especially high-ranking officials have not given any form of statement. The last statement was actually given by the minister or cabinet secretary in charge of security, internal security, yesterday, where he was just speaking against or in anticipation of this planned protest today. So there's not been any official government statements. But going forward, I believe in the next few hours or before the night ends or the day ends, probably the government will want to give us official statement as to their response or a statement regarding what has really happened in the case of the day and the days to come in terms of whether or not they're going to proceed with the finance bill now that it has actually been passed in Parliament.
Right. Now, the protesters, mostly the youth, have launched 7 days of rage. They have even stormed the parliament and set some areas on fire. Can they force Ruto government to roll back this decision?
Well, in terms of the procedure of writing or passing a bill in Parliament, so today was the third reading of the finance bill that was introduced in May 2024 as a supplementary contribution to the budget that is going to was read last week. So in terms of the process or the procedure of passing a parliamentary bill, so this has actually been the final phase of the reading of the bill, which will now therefore go for signing. So we are seeing that it has actually passed all these particular phases, and now it is actually up to the president whether to sign it or not. So that is actually where there's going to be a lot of discussion as to whether the president is really going to either listen to the demands of the protesters or, on the other hand, go ahead with the planned bill, which is part of a larger scheme, as you rightly put it, to finance Kenya's next financial year for 2024-2025, especially on debt repayment. And that is why we are seeing a number of recommendations, especially on excess duty, income tax, as well as withholding tax.
Yeah. And we're hearing worrying reports of security forces being accused of abducting prominent Kenyans, particularly those who have large social media followings. What do you make of these reports?
Actually, it is quite unfortunate. You will recall that most of these protests, since they began last week on Tuesday, were largely peaceful, and led by the youth, who mobilized through social media, who mobilized through phones, coming to the central business district of Nairobi and other towns, and they have been largely peaceful. And of course, the police in Kenya were really known for being very confrontational and very brutal, would tear gas them. And of course, this afternoon we saw that as these protesters moved towards Parliament, they were shot by the policemen, and we're told about 10 people have actually lost their lives. So we can see that it is not just about the abduction that happened to these very prominent social media personalities who are actually mobilizing actually given ways in which they can be able to really education in terms of how they can approach protests very peaceful, have been abducted by allegedly the Kenyan security apparatus. So it is quite worrying that it is now not just about abductions, but it is also proceeding towards killing of peaceful protesters, as well as other forms of injustices that are being carried out by the Kenyan police and the security forces in the country.
Now, just one more question. These protests are against the tax hikes where the government is trying to raise us $2.7 billion to alleviate the debt crisis. You have touched on this. Do you feel that these hikes would be effective in this? And what will the effect on the average Kenyan citizens be who are already battling this cost of living crisis?
It is quite a burden on many Kenyan taxpayers. If you look at an ordinary taxpayer, Kenyan taxpayer, in terms of their payslip, there's a lot of deductions from housing levy, which was introduced in the last financial year, to many other forms of income tax payee and other forms of taxations, and their salaries and their incomes have remained the same. And this has made life very difficult, especially buying important commodities such as bread, oil, milk, which are used by everyday ordinary citizens. So it is quite a burden.
Nicodemus, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
It starts with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. For the first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost.